Okay, folks, welcome back. And we're super excited to have Dr. Jenkins here presenting for us, and I'll hand it over to her.
Good morning or afternoon, depending upon where you are. Thank you so much for choosing to be with me today during this session. We are going to be talking about bridging generational divides and looking more so at how we can have effective mentorship in the modern workplace. I am Dr. Ramona Jenkins, and I'm the Director of Teacher Quality and Staff Development in Kershaw County School District. And again, welcome to each of you. For today's presentation, we want to focus everyone around some basic knowledge, and then I'm going to just ask a few questions for you to answer in the chat. We will be using the chat several times today. First of all, just want you to think about the fact that now a lot of research is showing that people in the United States are living much longer than ever before. And with that being the case, that definitely provides an opportunity for persons to have a longer work life or career life, even non paid services such as volunteerism, but they are in the workplace. And what that means is that for several of us during our time in the workplace, we are going to encounter persons who will be either much older than us or who might even be much younger than us, definitely persons around the same age. But that really gives us the opportunity to think about how we matriculate into the workplace and how we either join ourselves with the workplace or decide to move on as we further our career. And our career path may be vertical, it may be horizontal, but this is just the beginning of what that career will look like and who all will be involved in our career. So today's session's goals are for us to understand the unique characteristics and the preferences of the persons that we work with or who we may encounter in our career. Also, explore activities that may focus on each generation that might help in your mentorship. And then also discuss some strategies for building inclusive mentorship programs and fostering intergenerational collaboration. And as we talk about mentorship today, what I want to do is ensure that we have a broad understanding of that concept. When we think of mentorship, it could involve a particular program that your state has required for you to implement with new teachers or new employees in your district. Mentorship also involves the opportunity for persons to have relationships which are one on one. And sometimes those relationships can be organically created. Sometimes they can also be suggested or even mandated by an employer. But today, as we look at mentorship, we are talking all inclusive of programs that might be required by your state, where you have a mentor that is certified, or you may have an individual person mentoring a new employee into the workforce. And also, you could call that a buddy system. And, or you may have a group or team of people that are mentoring a single person or a set of people. So, we just want to be sure that everybody understands when we are thinking of we're thinking of an all-inclusive approach. So the first thing that I want to do is we're going to talk about generations today is I want to honor a young lady called Priscilla. Priscilla, up into a couple of months ago, was the most seasoned worker that we have here in Kershaw County School District. Priscilla is 83 years old. And if we're thinking of generations, might be known as a traditionalist. She is the young lady who greeted persons when they first came into our district, made sure they knew where to go for interviews, answered our phones, and also make sure we kept schedules together. All valuable skills in the modern workplace. Priscilla found a great place to be and how to utilize those skills to strengthen us as a district and also to continue to do something that she loves. She is retiring this year, and I salute her and share her story with everyone. So when we think about generation, what is actually a generation? Generation cohort theory will define this as a group of individuals that live contemporaneously and they share some common things, their experiences, their values, their behaviors, their beliefs, their attitudes, their knowledge, all make them a generation. And this is what signifies their time, possibly some of their choices, possibly some of their preferences. When we think of generations today, we want to keep that open, recognizing that persons could identify with a generation that they are in, a generation before them, or a generation after them. So while the majority of this is looked at these common knowledge, common attitudes, common thoughts, common behaviors, some of this will be defined by who a person grew up with as a guardian, where they have spent their time, what country they lived in. So we want to make sure that we understand that and keep that before us. This is important because as an employer, we're looking at employee retention. We're looking at how costly it is to recruit persons, to onboard them, to also make sure they get the training. Also, some of the research that we have concerning generations will tell us that there is evidence that these differences in beliefs, values, and experience impact the workplace. If you have been an employer, especially in a leadership for any amount of time, I believe you would be on the side of saying that this evidence does actually show that this is impacted. And also for us as leaders, for those of us in the workplace, we have to understand that if we do not have empathy, if we are not able to understand others, it can and most likely will cause some conflicts. So, who are the generations that we are going to be thinking about and looking at today? You have Generation Z, who is generally at this time around the age of 30, and they represent the youngest generation, but also the fastest growing generation into the workforce. You also have millennials, who around this time are ages 31 to 44. They are the largest in the workforce at this time. You have Generation X, who might be around the ages of 45 to 59. And the majority of those are moving into leadership roles at this time. You also have baby boomers who may be retiring from the workforce around this time. You might have seen a lot of them retire during the COVID era. Also, you may see a lot of them choosing to retire now that they've made it through that period. And lastly, the traditionalists like Priscilla that I mentioned, that generation is also known as the silent generation. They are a very small but definitely impactful unit of our current workforce. So, as we begin to think about generational divides, also the unique characteristics and preferences, we want to do an activity called Cross the Line. This activity is going to require some skills that all of us have as persons in the workforce. The first thing that I'm going to ask you to do in order to make this activity to be one that works well in the workplace, or I'm sorry, in a virtual setting is if you want to participate in this, I would ask you to go ahead and turn your camera on. If you choose not to participate, it's not a problem at all. Generally, this is an in the workplace activity that you can do, but we can do it virtually. What I'm going to ask you to do before I read the directions is to grab a piece of paper that is white. Either the front of the paper can be white or the back of the paper can be white. But we just want a piece of paper that is totally white on the front or the back. And your piece of paper should just look like this. Okay? And during this activity, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. When you hear an indicator that you are comfortable with identifying with, I'm simply going to ask you to take the paper and place it right below your eye. This is a silent activity. It does not require any talking. So for example, if I said your favorite color is green, you will simply move the paper up and then move it down. And that is all that is required. So if you can grab that white piece of paper if you would like to participate. Our directions for cross the line is you're going to need to follow two critical rules for this, right? The first one is we're going to have silence throughout this entire activity, and that will enable us to experience our personal thoughts and feelings more clearly. Okay. Respect is imperative during this activity as we think about those of us who have gathered. Some of us may know one another, and some of us may not know one another. But as a group, we represent a workplace. We also represent generational divides. There is no pressure for you to respond to this activity. Okay. I list the categories, some of those categories will have gray areas. Okay. But you define them as you understand them. We are not putting definitions on these categories when I read the indicators. It is important that you are as honest as you can be, yet do not risk more than you feel comfortable sharing. And your sharing is indicated by your white piece of paper. You may choose to participate in an indicator, or you may simply choose to pass. That is totally up to you. If you cross the line, meaning you hold your white paper up, you might notice on the screen others who have crossed the line with you. Okay. So again, totally silent and use of respect. And again, all I'm asking you to do is take the paper, hold it up, place it down. I will read out the indicators and we will move forward. And for the sake of this activity, we will go ahead and get started. As I read these indicators to you, I will turn my camera off and you will simply hear my voice. If you identify with this indicator, you may hold your paper up. If not, you may wait until an indicator comes up that you do identify. The first indicator is you are female. You are male. You are left-handed. You are from a large city or town. You have attended a Nationals game. You took a vacation this summer. You consider yourself right-handed. You are the first one in your family to go to college. You received a scholarship or grant to attend college. You were encouraged to attend college by your parents. You believe you were paid less because of your race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, or class. You are the youngest child in your family. You are an only child. Your parents are divorced or separated. You are from a single parent household. You were born outside of the United States. You are Native American or a member of an indigenous tribe of North America. You are African American. You are Haitian. You are Indian. You are white European or European American. You are of mixed heritage. You are a person of color. You feel you know very little about your cultural heritage. You frequently saw characters who shared your race, religion, or sexual orientation portrayed in likable ways in books, TV, or movies. You speak more than one language. English is your second language. You practice a religion. You are another religion other than the three major US religions: Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish. You have at least one parent who did not complete high school. You are a first generation college student. You consider your family as middle class. You consider your family as upper class. You were raised with less than enough resources. You would like to lose 10 pounds or more. You, a friend or family member, has had an eating disorder. You have a visible or non visible physical or learning disability. You have cried at least once this year. You know someone who died in a car accident. You or a friend or family member has attempted suicide. You are comfortable with homosexuality. You or someone you know is gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. Your parents or grandparents might still have prejudicial thoughts. You have been in love and were hurt. You are comfortable with interracial relationships. You have had a person close to you pass away in the last year. You have had to work twice as hard to prove yourself in school or at work. And so while this activity has several other indicators, I wanted to read just those few to us. Thinking about the indicators that I read, our understanding of what a generation is, and our purpose today, if you would please take a moment. How does cross the line inform us of the unique characteristics of generations in the workplace? If you would type your response in the chat, I would appreciate it. I'll give you about a minute. How does cross the line inform us of the unique characteristics of generations in the workplace? Right, as I look in the chat, I see that cross the line has informed some of you that you can have something in common with someone that falls in a different age generation. Absolutely. Various generations have had different things to deal with and obstacles to overcome. Also stated is that it brings light to the many ways we can be unique, broadens diversity awareness beyond the commonly communication list. Values and beliefs are generational and expression. All generations have different perspectives and values. I appreciate each of your responses. As we think about this type of activity, it is an activity that you may wish to use with your employers, your team, or others that you work with. There are many indicators that are listed, but the goal is number one, for us to recognize things about ourselves, possibly those in the work environment who are just like us or experiencing the same things as we are, and also to look at the unique characteristics of each person. You might also think about how some of the indicators make you feel. You may be comfortable or uncomfortable with them. The main thing that we want to walk away with today is that when we think about unique characteristics of generations, we want to garner an attitude of respect and tolerance, understanding, as stated in the chat, that the experiences are what makes a person, and those experiences are their life experiences. They are true and they hold form for each individual person. So we're going to look at the different generations. And it is a lot of information, but we will sum it up at the end. But we want to give you kind of a guideline to go to, remembering that persons can enter and exit generations based upon their experiences or who they were reared by. As we think about our traditionalists, these are the oldest workers that remain in the workforce, those persons who are generally in their 70s to their 90s. And when we think about this group can be, with support, an active mentoring group to others in the workplace simply because of their extensive experience. We look at the values, the work environment, and the work style of each of these persons. And as you think about this group, it could be your mother, it could be your grandmother, or it could be your great great aunt, depending upon which generation you fall in. But these persons generally will value loyalty and respect and discipline. They will, most of the time, have been at the workplace a long, long time because they value that stability. And also, they may have, in your opinion, more conservative social norms. But when you think about their work style, they are more transactional. They really are not thinking about any emotional investments. Their learning is that you have called me to do a job, I'm going to do the job, and I'm going to receive a paycheck. So you may see persons like this who do not easily become a part of groups or sharing, and that may be a challenge for you as you are thinking about how do we put this bridge this gap in the generational divide and have them become part of the workforce. If you think about retaining them, you may want to think about the generational knowledge that they have concerning our jobs. How can I set up a way for them to be productive to share that with others? Really recognizing their contribution and allowing them to do some of that decision making is going to be paramount for this group. When you think about the group of baby boomers, you think about how for this group, they might shift toward a less demanding job roles and fewer hours simply because they saw some of the things that happened concerning their traditionalist parents or grandparents. They do not switch jobs often in their careers. So it's okay and easy for them to have worked somewhere 20 or 30 years. They do want to have that authoritative leadership style because they have a sense of duty. They want to pay their dues. When you think about a work environment, they do look for that feedback, but they don't want you to be constantly micromanaging. Tell them they did a good job, and that's the type of feedback that they are comfortable with. Also, giving them clear goals and specific deadlines. That structure is what they are used to, possibly because they had that from their traditionalist parents. They're definitely ambitious, but they understand when given a job, they'll do it. And simply just the recognition or appreciation of work is what they need. In retaining them, think about rewards that are more personal to them. Bonuses, promotion, professional development, those things will keep them engaged in the work environment and keep them functioning properly. Think about their life experiences, and that is what determines what you will see. They came through the civil rights movement when many of them felt like they were fighting for the rights of persons that lived in the same community, the same areas of them. They may not have been the same race or the same class or the same gender. So some of them will have that spirit of making sure that things are right and correct from their perspective. During this time, also, a number of women entered the workforce, and that changed the scope and the landscape of jobs that they were able to do. They found things that catered more to what women were able to do as they worked. This group also had a higher divorce rate, and they had more second marriages than their parents. So some of them may be a part of blended families. How does that relate to you in the workforce? They may have additional responsibilities outside of their own children, looking at step children or step parents or other things of that nature. Rock and roll was a common music sound among them, and they loved this. But also, you may see persons that do or have issues with recreational drugs or other things in this culture because this was something that was common in their time. Healthcare began to really expand itself. So we see this group having a much longer lifespan. And as traditionalists move on, baby boomers will be that group that is also continuing to stay in the workforce for a longer time based upon this. Moving to our next group, Generation X. These persons will have a really, really strong work ethic, but they are looking for flexibility as they focus more on work life balance as compared to either their parents or grandparents or great grandparents who were baby boomers and traditionalists. Diversity is one of the areas, as we mentioned before, that they really love as part of Generation X. Some of them do not really have an interest in being loyal to a company, but they really want to think about growing themselves and their competence. They are not concerned with rank, but more so they're concerned with how do I personally develop the person that I am. They can definitely be comfortable with telecommuting and flexibility work schedules. Some of you may have persons on your team who are not actually located in the building with you. And so you use a lot of technology to continue to communicate with those persons. Persons in this generation are very, very comfortable with that. And there are things that can be done to help them feel a part of the culture and the workforce. These persons are very independent, they're adaptable people, and they can engage in a number of ways with communicating, with phone calls, face to face, email, all of those things work with it. You will also find of them enjoy texting. They are very suitable and adaptable in those areas. You can retain these persons by showing that you appreciate the things that they do, but also giving them the opportunities to personally develop themselves. And again, when you think about moving that generational divide out of the way, what is it that this group can offer to the workforce that will improve business services and also create a culture of inclusivity within the workforce for persons that you are working with? Their historical perspectives are going to include the dot-com perspective, the Rodney King era, the AIDS epidemic. At a time when people were dying from AIDS, we see years now. There are cures, there are medicines that are able to be used to slow that down. So, coming through this era, they did see some monumental changes. With the dot-com boom, we think about online and e-commerce. And while these things had been going on, this is when it really took off and took form. So you might find persons in this group initially beginning that have several counterparts that may work in other time zones or even in other countries. This group is definitely capable and comfortable. Again, thinking about that diversity and inclusivity. One of the things that really started happening during this time was the Columbine shootings or shootings in schools, and seeing the overtake of schools as a place where tragedy happens. And so these persons think again in a more diverse and an inclusive way. They may be more empathetic to all groups as they can identify with the loss of a child or other issues that may spur in the workplace. Millennials, this group around this time are those who may be the largest group that are in the workplace. Okay. And this group comes in to persons who have the privilege, sometimes the ability to go to college. They're seeing inflated costs, student loans, global prices. These persons are the ones who are really, really looking for that financial stability and job security. And when you think about this group, you may see this group as a group who is more entrepreneurial, who wants to be more in control of their financial stability. So they may or may not remain at a job for a long amount of time. They do really love that work life balance, and they want a sense of belonging in their professional lives, but not necessarily being tied to a company. So when you think about how do we pull this divide out of the way, you think about what are some things that you can offer in your work environment that is going to be enticing to this group and want to have them excel. Think about team building activities that's important for them. Think about professional development and also some promotional opportunities where they can use those skills that they have to show what it is that they know. They want to be able to manage their own schedules. So if your employer can, you think about offering some flexibility in the scheduling for them. They want to pursue those remote working opportunities. Again, this group will also be a group that will work with persons who might not be in their same geographical or country location. You can retain this group by looking at some of your options for benefits. What is it that you're able to offer to them because of the financial instability that they grew up through? Is that tuition assistance? Is that wellness program? Is that healthcare? Think of this group sometimes as some of them who may or may not be married. They may have animals as a part of their family. Are you able to offer pet options and other things? Really think about getting out of your comfort zone to the traditional benefits and think about some of those things that these persons value that would make them to want to be more or inclined or engaged with the company. This group too saw a huge rise in social media and the use of cell phones. Cell phones were here when they arrived. So that is all that they've known. We were in the middle of a war, Iraq and Afghanistan, and this group was able to see the consequences of war, some of the benefits, but also some of the cons. Going through a depression with the housing collapse, several of these people may have situations where they are in debt or they have lost their home, and the present job that they have may not be the best for them. Again, this group looks for options. Also, we saw the onslaught of dating online. And so this group is more comfortable with the use of social media to connect with others as opposed to just having to be in person with someone. This group also saw the first African American president, which this group also is a group that will focus on diversity, inclusiveness. They also like to look to see that others are being used for their assets and not just because of their longevity with the company. This group will require and look for a personal connection in the workplace. So, really being empathetic and having those open communication styles are going to be important to them. This is also the first group that we noticed in our history that really, really has an issuance of looking at mental health support. What is it that an employer will offer them in order for them to feel secure and safe as a human and not just as a worker of the company. When you think about your company culture, equity, inclusion is very, very important to them. They're seeking those non-traditional work roles and schedules and some flexibility. Most of these persons are going to prefer the video calls, the one-to-one meetings, because of the fact that social media was the boom for them. Social activities that will build those stronger interpersonal relationships, and those social activities can occur online or they can occur in person. This group is comfortable either way. Lastly, they want that security through that job training and attention to their mental health. So if you are able to create those mentorships, whether they are one-on-one, direct person, wellness programs, any type of development for them are ways that you can engage this group. To sum up some of them, if you will notice, this just gives us a brief example of some of the ways that they enjoy communicating based upon their group, how they like to be acknowledged, whether that's a plaque, whether that's an award, whether that's a bonus. How can you show respect to them as a leader or as a colleague? Also thinking about your supervision styles for them. How do you motivate them? And how do they work best? So quickly, now that we've seen those generations, I want you to think about your own personal self. And in the chat, just with a number, which form or which of these forms do you prefer as a communication style? Which form or which of these forms do you prefer as a communication style? You can choose the numbers one, or you can choose several numbers. One is for seniors, two is baby boomers, three are Gen Xers, four is Gen Y. But which ones do you prefer? Person to write you, call you, email you, text you? Place your number in the chat. All right, I see some of us are ranking. Good. Several of us have several ways that we like to be communicated with. When we think about these communication styles, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily a part of that generation, but a lot of these, again, as we talked about, our objectives are based upon personal preference and the unique characteristics of us. If you think about it, most of us are multifaceted in the way that we prefer to communicate. Some of us prefer that persons we work with only email us. Some of us prefer that they do not have our personal number, but also some of us prefer our close friends. Girl, call me or shoot me a text message. It really all depends. One of the things that I think about is in a school district, when I am working with students, while I love for people to text me or give me a call, my heart is touched when I go to a school and when I get ready to leave and the students have written me a card. I would prefer that on my birthday. Love phone calls and I definitely love texts, but I love it again when someone writes a card or they deliver a gift with a written message. So for me, it is contextual. But again, that depends upon the persons that we are working with, what those things look like, and how we choose to be communicated with, which can and should cross all of the generations. There are some that we are stronger than in others, and as a leader, we look to grow those. So as we move to mentorships, I want you to take a second to read this quote. As you think about the relationships that you will form, the mentorships that you want to create, I want you to really thinking about having those as ongoing and being intentional, but mainly how can the relationship be mutually enriching to the persons or persons who take place in a part of this? So take a second to look at these. Have you ever heard any of these comments in your workplace? If anyone would like to unmute at this time and make a statement concerning these, you may. Have you heard of any of these? Have you seen these? Or you can place something in the chat. Have you yourself stated these while in the workplace? As we think about the persons that we are working with, we think about the fact that we have a number of generations. Specifically in education, some of the things that I've heard are, have you ever heard this? She doesn't stay late after school. I don't know when she's going to finish her lesson plans. They don't arrive early enough. I'm not certain how they're going to get things done. Looking in the chat, I've heard too many of these statements. I can agree, so have I. I resonate with this. This is how it's always been done. Drives me crazy. Absolutely. We hear these statements among persons. And we have to remember when these persons are making these statements, they are speaking from their unique characteristics or their unique preferences. Using predictive index is a great way to match mentors and mentees. Absolutely. When I think about these and I think about these statements, the first question that I ask myself is, why would a person say that? As a mentor, I want to be certain that now that I understand what we've seen here, all of these generations, how they focus, what their value is, how they work in the work environment, how do I reward them? How do I recognize them? How do I communicate with them? I take all of these things in to start being inclusive in my approach in mentoring with persons and fostering that collaboration. When I see these statements, I also have to think that I remind persons, for example, when we're looking at contracts, our contracts in our school district do not have a designated time. We state a number of hours that a person is supposed to work. While, yes, you may feel a person has to stay after school in order to get that. We've seen with some of these groups, they are much more efficient in the work that they do. So while it may take me 3 hours to complete something, it may only take them one. It does not mean that their work is of poor quality or it is less value. It means that our skill sets are different in a given time and place in the workplace. And that's something that we have to think about and something that we have to consider. So when we see these comments, how do we begin to mitigate them and move towards that mentoring and fostering that collaboration? Well, let's think about that. What is it that I can do? Well, first of all, as we spoke earlier, if you are a person who has remote individuals working in your district or place of work, I would say that encompasses a lot of us. A lot of us, if you think about it, are having a hard time retaining talent in our district. So we are using remote teachers, substitutes, and persons in other areas. But they are a part of the workplace. And we really have to take and seek the opportunity to have them be a part of our culture. Think about your office space and how that might look for different generations. Do you have common places where persons can work together? Or do we still develop a more traditional style? We have to think about sometimes the seating, the arrangements, the physical environments communicates to people if we are being inclusive or if we are being exclusive. Think about the technology that persons use as a remote person and making sure that we are providing them the technology in order for them to be able to do the job that we are asking them to do. When you think about your remote workers, how are they able to do the planning? Is there a time for them to be able to collaborate and talk and communicate with teams? Or are we just working with them through email? We really want to think globally and think about how we accommodate that. Think about training and learning styles. We're training and we're using a digital space sometimes for those persons who may not be in the physical environment, or if they are in the physical environment, we're coming together in person. Are we accommodating those different learning styles? Do we have the opportunity to use the digital platform, also to use a paper and pencil platform? As we think about that, those are the ways that we can begin pulling those groups together so that they're not divided. Do we have persons that can work with them or mentor them? That could be someone that is Generation X who is mentoring a baby boomer, showing them how to use the technology. Have we set up a culture that embraces that? Also, when we think about how we communicate, having a variety of ways to make sure that information gets to those employees. We think about that. We want to make sure that we are promoting understanding. What does that look like? Team building activities, opportunities for persons to get together, whether that is one-on-one, which some of your traditionalists or baby boomer persons may prefer, or maybe that is in small groups. Really think of ways that we can show that we value each person's contribution and their perspective. We also want to make sure as leaders that we definitely quickly address conflict. When we hear of stereotypes or persons having misunderstandings or even grouping individuals by comment that they've made, clothes that they wear, maybe they've shared with you their type of worship that they do, we want to address those quickly and promptly, understanding that I think each of us, after cross the line, have learned we're all multifaceted. We have different preferences and characteristics that make us who we are. And we depend on those to feel good about ourselves, to elevate our self esteem. But we must also remember so does our colleague and their personal and unique characteristics. We want to make sure that we encourage our employees to communicate and give opportunities for that. They may want to communicate one on one, they may choose to have a mediator. Think about how we again are mentoring and allow for that opportunity so that we can promote productive discussion. We may want to have a coffee and chat where we come together and we talk about certain issues or we want to address things. We want to make sure that if we allow for that, that persons do not feel like they are being confronted with something or that we're setting up a confrontational workplace. You also want to think about the training that you offer. And your baby boomers provide any insight on job specific skills or even your traditionalists, as they will have some of the history of the workplace. Again, making sure that you, the leader, help with those mentorships. We're not necessarily looking for persons to say, this is the way that it always has been done, but help them change that language to this is what has been successful for us. But we're also looking for other ways to be successful. When you help them in choosing that language and being the person that communicates that to them, you see that they are able to be inclusive and start using their skills as a mentor. Also, thinking about having an open learning environment where your younger employees can contribute to your older employees. That may be in the way that they communicate, that might also be in the way that they use technology, but give them the opportunity to feel like they are contributing to the workplace, something that is important. With that open communication, think about something that works for everyone so that we can cut down on miscommunications. That could be emails, that could be instant messages, that could be text, that could be a social platform. Even if you all are in the office, sometimes think of using that. That could be face to face, that could be lunch with your team. Many, many ways that you can have the opportunity to open up communication and allow your team and the persons that work with you to mentor and to also share that with others. When we think about judging, think about the activity that we did cross the line and think about how you can help your team to focus on understanding the preferences and the perspectives of others. Some things are not about wrong or right, but they are about making sure that we have an open perspective. Also, if you have the ability or if you can bring the conversation up, I encourage you to rethink the benefits that your job offers. As people move into the workforce, there are things that might have been important to me when I started working that are no longer important to another generation as they have started. Some of us have been in the field for 20, 30, or 40 years, and there are some benefits that have been phenomenal for us. Some of us are just getting into the field and we are in year 1, 3, or 5. Think about what you're offering and what else could you offer. How could you figure that out? I'm glad you asked. One of the things that we use here are surveys. We definitely use feedback surveys. We use culture surveys. We use check the pulse surveys. We also use exit interviews to find out what is working well in our present district and what are some things that we can change. When we get that information, we take that information and try to act on it as much as possible. Again, the goal is to increase that mentorship, to also make sure all of our employees understand that when you finish or create or do a survey, you are being heard. While thinking about all the differences, just like fraternal twins, there are a lot of ways that we are similar in these generations. We can promote teamwork, flexible work arrangements. We can have employees be involved in the decision-making process that affects them. We can also think about the financial rewards that are offered. Some of us are offering sign-on bonuses. Some of us are also offering work-life balance where if teachers work a day in the summer, we give them that day as flex time in the fall or the spring. Really think about the similarities that we have. Those are the things that, number one, are going to keep generations at your workforce. Number two, they're going to allow for that intergenerational collaboration. Number three, they're going to increase awareness in you as a leader about the persons that you serve and also the resources that you provide. And number four, they're going to make for a more powerful work experience and work environment. Understand that the similarities that we have and having multi-generational persons in your workforce is what makes and keeps it strong. And so I'll leave you with this today before I take questions. Margaret Wheatley says to us, in the process of understanding another, it is important to consider that person's perspective, his or her perceptions, their culture, their ethnic, generational, gender, experiential worldview. When you look at this picture, there are certain facts that I believe you and I will agree on. Those facts are there are two men in the picture, there is a boat, there is land, there is water, there are clouds. But the persons here are not asking us to debate the facts. They are asking us to consider their personal perspective. One man who has been on an island, he may be hungry, he may be tired, he is in need of a boat to deliver him. Another man who has been at sea for a long time, he might be tired also and just wants to rest. Both of them, their perspectives, share with us and enlighten us on the unique characteristics and preferences that they have, but it also tells us about their needs. Considering them, are we as leaders able to mentor them and meet both of those needs? We absolutely are, because in looking at the picture, all the resources that we need are there. What questions or comments do you have at
It's
this
all good, but I just blind.
I thought I heard someone speaking, but I don't hear them now.
Oh, that was me. I unmuted myself. I apologize.
That's okay.
But I'm happy to help you facilitate any questions. You can see the chat, correct?
Yes, I can.
All
Thank
right.
you, Christine, I like what you said about teachers getting flex time for working in the summer. How is pay addressed for this flex time? Is this in lieu of payment? One of the things, Christine, thank you. That's a great question that we've done in our district. We call them, and some districts surrounding us, we call them swap days. Some of our principals at the school level, because they know about their current schedule, they will let teachers know when they have the option of swap days, and they might choose 2 different days. And what will happen is that the pay is not changed. They just fill out a form for the day that they are choosing to swap so that we keep a record of that in payroll. And so the day that they are out does not count against them or go against their personal days. Our teachers have seemed to really enjoy that approach, and a lot of them make use of that. Thank you for that question. I hope that clearly answers your question. Are there any other questions or comments?
Okay, well, I certainly enjoyed your presentation a great deal. I love the activities that you shared as well.